Morning in New Orleans began with the harsh slam of a car door and a shouted command cutting through the fog-drenched street. Out of the car now, a woman in a gray suit stepped out, her wavy black hair shifting gently in the breeze, her eyes calm and steady amid two police officers raising their cuffs. That woman was Serena Cole, 42. The district attorney of Orleans Parish, the same woman who had just last night signed a summons against several officers accused of excessive force in a case that had shaken the entire state. Serena had only meant to stop at the corner of Chartres Street for coffee before heading to court, but in an instant, two officers, Drake and Collins, appeared as if they had been waiting for her. License and registration. You impersonating a government official, Drake's voice carried a stench of contempt. Serena pulled her badge from her bag and held it up. I'm District Attorney Serena Cole from the Orleans Parish office. I'm on my way to court. Drake gave the badge a quick glance, then squinted. That's a pretty good fake. You think we're that stupid? Collins, younger and standing behind him, looked uneasy, but said nothing. Serena kept her tone composed. If you want to verify, call the district attorney's office. They'll confirm it. Drake sneered, snatched the badge, and threw it onto the wet pavement. You talk too much. He shoved her hard, knocking the coffee cup from her hand. It shattered on the ground. The street froze. An old man walking his dog stopped and turned. A woman pulled her son aside. No one spoke, no one dared. Serena took a deep breath, steadying herself as Drake grabbed her wrist and twisted it backward. You're under arrest for impersonation and obstruction of justice. Cold metal pressed against her skin. The click of the cuffs closing sounded sharp and final, like the lock of a verdict. You're making a serious mistake, Serena said, her voice firm and steady, almost frighteningly calm. I told you I'm the district attorney. Drake spat on the pavement and leaned in close. Sure, a district attorney from what planet you think wearing a suit makes you special? He yanked her arm and dragged her toward the police car, its lights flashing red and blue across the wet asphalt. Serena's hair fell loose across her face. From somewhere behind, she could hear the faint clicks of phone cameras. A young man whispered shakily, "They're arresting the district attorney for real." Drake snatched the phone from his hand and threw it into a storm drain. No filming. Collins hesitated, his voice low. Drake maybe let her explain we should be careful, but Drake cut him off. Shut up. I'm handling this by the book. He opened the trunk and pulled out a towel that smelled faintly of gasoline. You like to act classy, huh? Let me help you remember where you really belong. He poured the leftover coffee over Serena's hair and laughed. Serena closed her eyes. She thought of her son Noah probably eating breakfast with his aunt right now. She thought of her husband, who had been shot dead 10 years ago while investigating police brutality. And she thought of the last thing he ever told her. When they take your voice, let silence become your evidence. Drake shoved her into the back seat. His grin was smug, victorious. Sit tight, Miss Law and Order. Serena looked straight into the rearview mirror, her reflection framed between their gloating faces. You know, she said softly. Her tone, cool as tempered steel, every second of this is being recorded on surveillance cameras. And I promise you'll see this moment again, but next time it'll be in my courtroom. Collins froze while Drake laughed loudly. Did you hear that? She said her courtroom. But his laughter stopped abruptly when the radio crackled with a dispatch. Code 72, prepare for the police misconduct hearing. District Attorney Serena Cole scheduled to appear at 8 a.m. Silence filled the car. Collins swallowed hard. Drake turned to look at the woman sitting upright in the back seat, her hair disheveled, clothes stained with coffee, yet her eyes showed no fear. In that moment, he realized something was very wrong, but it was already too late. Serena tilted her head slightly and spoke slowly, each word deliberate. "Now, do you know who I am?" The police cruiser rolled forward, merging into the flow of morning traffic. Behind the tinted glass, a humiliated district attorney sat quietly, already preparing for the storm she was about to unleash. In a world where power is worn like armor, sometimes justice begins in the very moment they think you are weakest. That afternoon, the Orleans Parish District Attorney's office was wrapped in a silence so tense it felt like a drawn string. No one dared to ask a question when Serena Cole walked in. The woman still bore coffee stains on her lapel. Her hair was damp, faint red marks circled her wrists, yet her eyes gleamed as if she had just stepped out of darkness. She said nothing, only gestured for her secretary, Marcus LeBlanc, to follow her into her office. When the door closed, the click of the lock sounded like a declaration of war. Marcus, who had worked with her for 10 years, saw something in her eyes more terrifying than anger, absolute control. "They came after you," he said quietly, "and they think they'll get away with it." Serena placed her damaged DA badge on the desk beside a scratched phone. "I want every recording from the street cameras around Chartres this morning, and the police radio transmissions. There's an unofficial order behind this. I want to know who signed it." Marcus nodded. "I'm guessing it's more than just two ordinary cops." Serena gave a cold smile. "No. This was a message. Someone wanted to remind me that their power is still bigger than the law I represent." She walked to the window, looking out over the Mississippi, glinting under the afternoon sun. "But they forget the law isn't something you own. It's a double-edged blade, and I know how to hold the right side." Behind her, Marcus spoke carefully. "You should rest." After what happened today, Serena interrupted, her tone low but firm. "If I rest, they'll rewrite this story in their version. They'll say I lost control. They'll call me the aggressive prosecutor. I need to write it first." She took off her blazer, revealing bruised arms, then sat at her desk and opened her laptop. The pale blue light reflected off her face, unnervingly calm. As the screen displayed the title, Police Misconduct Hearing Internal Report, Serena began typing each word, cutting through the silence like a blade. Outside phones rang non-stop. Reporters, the governor's office, local news channels. Everyone wanted the official version. She turned them all off. "Not now," she said. "The truth belongs on the record, not on the air." Marcus watched her work, then left quietly. When the door shut behind him, Serena allowed herself a long, steady breath. From her drawer, she took out a small framed photo of her husband, Evan Cole, smiling gently beneath the faded words, "Freedom is earned, not granted." He had been shot 10 years ago in what police called a professional misunderstanding. Since then, Serena stopped believing in misunderstandings. There were only choices, conscience, or power. The desk phone buzzed. The caller ID read Elena Brooks, a young attorney who had joined the office 6 months earlier. Her voice trembled. "Ms. Serena, I heard what happened this morning. People are talking. Some say the video is already spreading on the police internal network." Serena closed her eyes and nodded slightly. "Good. If they want to spread it, let them. The more people who see it, the more witnesses we have. I just need you to do one thing: make sure no one deletes the Blue Shield case files from the system." Elena hesitated. "But I heard Police Chief Grant Miles just ordered an internal investigation freeze." Serena's smile was cold. I expected he would. That night, as the city lights came on, Serena left the courthouse through the side door. The river breeze carried a metallic chill mixed with salt. She paused on the steps and checked her phone. A new message from an unknown number appeared. Don't forget, justice protects no one. It only watches. She didn't delete it, only saved it and named the file Threat 1. When she returned home, her small apartment on St. Charles Avenue was still lit. Her son Noah sat at the table coloring with pencils. When he heard her, he ran over and hugged her tightly. I saw the news. They said you were arrested. It's all right, Noah, she said, brushing his hair. I'm fine. Mom, weren't you scared? Serena looked at the boy, his eyes mirroring the fear she had been hiding all day. Of course, she said softly. But being scared doesn't mean giving up. You know, people can only humiliate you if you let them. After putting him to bed, she stepped onto the balcony and gazed at the city glowing under the night sky. Jazz drifted from a bar across the street, blending with the distant hum of traffic. She remembered what Marcus once told her New Orleans is a city of memory. No one is ever truly forgiven here. Serena knew that was true. What happened that morning would not fade away, and if justice was a broken scale, she would be the hand to set it right. In the darkness, she opened her laptop and sent her first internal memo since the incident. The subject line was brief re-accountability meeting tomorrow at 7 a.m. At the bottom, she signed Serena Cole, District Attorney. The click of the send button was soft, yet in the stillness of the room, it sounded like a war drum. Serena looked at the clock. 7 minutes to midnight. One day ended, and the storm officially began. The next morning, New Orleans woke to a storm that didn't come from the sky, but from phone screens. An 18-second video spread like wildfire showing Serena Cole shoved to the ground, coffee spilling through her hair as 2 police officers grabbed her arms and dragged her away like a criminal. The title read, District Attorney Loses Control on the Street. Within 3 hours, the clip had reached over 1 million views, flooded with vicious comments. One user wrote, "See, that's feminism for you. She thinks power makes her untouchable." Another replied, "If she's really a DA, why didn't she prove it right there?" On Serena's desk, her phone rang non-stop. Reporters, news channels, even the governor's office, everyone wanted the official response. Marcus walked in holding a folder, his face heavy. "They've twisted everything he said. The edit cuts out the part where you identified yourself as DA. It only shows your reaction." Serena watched the distorted footage of herself, her gaze calm, detached, as if studying a thief breaking into her home. "They think if enough people see a lie, it becomes truth," she said quietly. "Then all we need is to let the truth reveal itself." Marcus nodded. "I've spoken to the tech division. There's a traffic cam recording from another angle. It captures everything." But he hesitated. The police headquarters just announced a press conference at 11. They're calling it a procedural misunderstanding. Chief Grant Miles will speak himself. Serena gave a dry, brittle laugh. "Good. The moment they speak publicly, they leave evidence." At that same hour, the local news anchor beamed at the camera. In a developing story, District Attorney Serena Cole is seen resisting officers during a routine security check. Police say an internal review is underway. A banner scrolled across the screen, Serena Cole victim or aggressor. Back at the office, the air was thick with tension. Colleagues passed by quietly, eyes down, avoiding her gaze. Elena Brooks, the young attorney, brought her a fresh cup of coffee. "Everyone's scared to be associated," Elena whispered. I heard rumors you might be suspended. Serena accepted the cup, taking a slow sip. When people are afraid, they stay silent. And when they stay silent, injustice lives another day. She looked straight at Elena. But that's fine. We still have a few people brave enough to speak. That afternoon, she met Marcus at an old bar on Royal Street, once a hangout for journalists. In the corner sat a woman with curly hair and large glasses. Marcus introduced her. Tasha Green, independent blogger. She's got sources inside the department. Tasha smiled, her tone sharp. I know you're looking for the uncut footage. I have it. And I have the police radio audio from that morning. Serena tilted her head slightly. What do you want in return? Just the truth. Made public. Tasha replied, They're trying to bury you, and I don't like watching black women get erased from their own stories. Marcus plugged in the hard drive, playing the first few seconds. The radio crackled clearly, female suspect well-dressed possible impersonation of government official. Keep this quiet, no press involvement? Serena's eyes closed slowly. Whose voice is that Internal Affairs Sergeant? Tasha said. Part of the Blue Shield network. I've been tracking them for 2 years. Outside, rain began to fall. Serena stared through the fogged glass, thinking about the years she had spent fighting police brutality. Her husband once told her, When justice gets distorted, the first casualty is the truth. Now that truth was in her hands, fragile but razor sharp. Marcus set down his glass. What are you going to do next? Serena's voice was cold as frost. Expose them. If they want to put me on trial in the media, then I'll make the media their courtroom. That night, as she walked home under the streetlights, the wet pavement reflected her shadow like a mirror. When she opened the door, Noah was on the couch, eyes fixed on the television. On screen, Grant Miles stood at a podium, surrounded by cameras, speaking calmly. This was simply an unfortunate misunderstanding. We respect District Attorney Cole, but she should have been more cooperative. Laughter rippled faintly through the press room. Serena turned off the TV. Her son looked up, voice trembling. They're lying about you. Yes, they are, she said softly. But you know lies don't live as long as people think. So what happens now? She smiled faintly. Now we show them what justice looks like when it stands back up after being humiliated. That night, Serena sat alone at her desk, the computer screen glowing in the dark. She opened the new video file, skipping to the 8th minute the moment Drake ripped her badge from her hand. The camera shook. Voices shouted, then her voice cut through, clear and cold. You're making a serious mistake. I am the district attorney of this parish. The frame froze on Drake's face, smug, drunk on power. Serena whispered to herself, Tomorrow you'll hear those words again. In court. Outside, the rain grew heavier, drumming on the roof like the opening beat of a storm the whole city was about to face. That Tuesday morning, New Orleans City Hall was packed with reporters, cameras jostling on the gray stone steps, flashbulbs popping in a staccato. On the big screen in the main hall, the face of Police Chief Grant Miles appeared, wearing a practiced, confident smile. He spoke in a calm, rehearsed voice. We always respect due process. However, District Attorney Cole's public accusations against 2 officers before an investigation is complete are divisive. Scattered applause rose from the officers' supporters. Serena watched the press conference from her office, the blue glow of the monitor washing over her sober face, each of Grant's words feeling like a needle prodding at her honor. Marcus came in and set a freshly printed packet in front of her. The list of complaints filed against the police department over the past 5 years, 47 cases in all, each dismissed for the same reason: insufficient evidence. Blue Shield Network. Marcus said quietly, "This is the pit Evan was investigating before he died. I found Alan Cross's trace in at least 10 of these cases." Serena flipped through the file, her eyes hard as steel. Alan Cross, Deputy Commissioner, the man who had clasped her husband's hand at that memorial, eyes rimmed red, offering condolences like a virtuoso actor. She remembered his hand on her shoulder, a gentle squeeze that had sent a chill through her. Evan was a good man, Serena. Sometimes justice goes astray, but we will bring it back. Now those words sounded like hellish mockery. "Where's Elena, Serena?" asked in a low voice. "She said there's an urgent matter at evidence," Marcus answered. "Tell her to come up immediately." 10 minutes later, Elena arrived, youthful, face eyes shadowed with worry. Serena pointed to the screen, playing the internal radio clip Tasha had sent the night before. "Do you hear anything strange?" Elena leaned in, the male voice coming through clear as day. "Report complete. Subject neutralized. Keep this quiet. Do not let the DA's office know." Serena stared at her. "Which unit is that frequency? Internal affairs, ma'am." "And who runs that frequency?" Elena faltered, then whispered, "Deputy Commissioner Cross." The room fell into a heavy silence. Serena closed her eyes for a second, then opened them, voice decisive. "Marcus, I want a warrant to search Cross and Grant's communications data. If they resist, invoke a federal civil rights probe." Elena spoke up quick and worried. "But that could tip them off that we're digging." Serena tilted her head, her gaze a knife. "And if we don't dig, they bury us alive." That afternoon, she drove to Bywater to meet Tasha. The cafe sat under a canopy of purple bougainvillea, the smell of roasted coffee mingling with smoke and the breath of people. Tasha waited in a shadowed corner, laptop open. "I found the money trail," she said softly, "a slush fund from the police union. Grant Cross and several senior officers take a cut. They use it to silence victims." Serena went quiet. "Do you have proof?" Tasha nodded and pushed a hard drive across the table. "But I need you to protect my source. People on the inside can be eliminated." Serena looked at her and saw in the young reporter's eyes fear tempered by courage. "Do you know you're stepping into a real battlefield?" Tasha gave a weary smile. "I grew up in the projects listening to sirens at night. I know what a battlefield looks like. This time, I'm not running." Back in her car, Serena sat in silence as sudden rain hammered the glass like a drum. She remembered the last time she saw her husband, Evan, standing at the door with a file saying he'd be back before dinner. That night, they found him in his car, 2 bullets in his chest, police calling it a highway robbery. Since then, she had lived with the question, who pulled the trigger and who gave the order? Her phone buzzed a message from an unknown number. "Don't dig up the dead coal. Some secrets keep the city peaceful." She narrowed her eyes, saved the message, then drove straight back to the office. Marcus waited pale. "They just attacked our systems. The files on Evan were wiped clean." Serena stood very still, her hands clenched. "No, Marcus, you can't delete memory." She turned, voice low. "Tonight. I want a full copy of the slush fund data. If necessary, we publish it to the public. We will not be erased." Thunder rumbled in the distance. Lightning flashed, reflecting across the glass, Serena's profile caught in white light, her eyes burning. In that instant, she understood clearly they weren't just trying to humiliate her. They were defending an empire built on the silence of the people and the fear of justice. To bring that empire down, she would have to light a fire no one dared to put out. That morning, the big meeting room at City Hall felt sealed, like a locked box, the slap of shoes on tile marking a grim tempo. Grant Miles stood at the podium with a neat smile and unnerving composure, speaking of order and procedure of the trust the community must have in law enforcement, while union representatives in the front rows nodded and applauded. Serena sat perfectly still, saying nothing, her eyes like a clean cut fixed on the man who had once shaken her hand at Evans Memorial. Grant offered his honeyed threat. "We recommend you temporarily step back from the case to preserve the court's image to avoid inflaming the situation." And the room fell quiet. Some lawyers murmuring, a few reporters buried in their phones. Marcus closed his eyes, hearing the tone for what it was, not an invitation, but a warning wrapped in etiquette. Serena rose and walked forward, each step deliberate, as if marching into a battle, her gaze slicing past Grant to the men behind him. The union boss, several judges from upstate, and Alan Cross, the deputy commissioner, whose stare was as cold as a blade. She spoke without civility. "You ask me to withdraw because you worry about the court's image. Grant Miles, have you considered how many victims' reputations were sacrificed to keep that image?" The room erupted in a stunned hush, then low chatter. Grant flushed, but tried to keep his smile. "Miss Serena, this is not the time for accusations. Procedures exist. Procedures she cut in are not rugs to sweep dead evidence under." The line landed hard. Elena gripped the chair arm, and Marcus felt his heart race. The alarm pulled. Grant's voice hardened. "If you persist in this public agitation, we will initiate disciplinary proceedings. A prosecutor must maintain neutrality." Serena turned to the cameras, to the lenses that served as the public's eyes. "I once swore by candlelight I would not abandon justice for personal safety. You ask me to abandon that oath, to save face." The tension tightened until even the sound of paper turning seemed like thunder. After the meeting, Serena strode down the hallway, anger washing over her like a hard rain. Marcus close behind, whispering, "They'll push the suspension file. We need a defense plan." She did not answer at once. She had already run through options in her head, exposing the slush fund, dragging Cross into daylight, calling in the feds, each move a life-or-death gamble. As she walked to her car, an envelope fell at her feet inside a photograph of Noah outside his art school, as if watched from afar. The back scrawled with, "If you do not step back, the boy will learn what it is to lose his mother." Serena crushed the envelope in her fist heat, rising into a controlled fury. Marcus gripped her hand low, and certain, "We must protect Noah first." That night, they moved Noah to a friend's house, Serena watching him through the narrow doorway, feeling his smallness in a world of shadows, vowing not to let fear decide for her. She changed residences, new phone number, copied every vital file to 3 different hard drives hidden in secure locations. Meanwhile, Elena quietly called an old contact in internal affairs, voice trembling. "Can you help prevent them deleting the files?" The answer was cold. "You know, too much already. Flowers on a grave don't blossom. Different." Elena paused, then made a choice she had never imagined. She went to Tasha and forwarded an anonymous email with an electronic signature captured from the internal system. Clear proof Someone had tried to delete Evan's file. The plot twist arrived without fanfare. Elena had not been bought. She had feigned weakness. Beneath the trembling voice lay a decision to fight. She could not bear watching the powerful steal justice by stealth. When Elena handed the file to Tasha, her eyes blazed with a new resolve. I will make right what they buried. The next morning, an internal deletion request email with a forged signature hit Tasha's blog. The headline read, "Internal deletion request. Evan Cole case," and the city stirred. Grant Miles raged. Cross went pale. Serena smiled, not with relief, but with the cold smile Marcus had once seen in the coroner's office, the smile of someone who had decided to settle a score. In the late kitchen hour, Serena held a glass of water, staring at her hands that had filed charges and signed warrants, now mapping the steps to crush a network. She understood clearly hitting hard would draw blood. Staying silent would allow many more to be crushed beneath the heel of power. She set the glass down, her eyes flashing like a blade. "They ask for a fight, they will get one," she whispered, and in that whisper was the scent of smoke from a battle about to ignite. The morning of the hearing unfolded like a ceremony in hell. The courtroom was packed wall to wall with reporters, lawyers, community representatives, and the cold, stony faces from the police department. Serena entered not quickly but step by deliberate step, and when she appeared in the doorway, the entire hall seemed to stop breathing. Her head was completely shaved, the lights glinting off smooth skin dotted with faint red marks like small wounds carved for the world to see. It was not the image of a woman broken or humiliated. It was a badge of flesh, silent and defiant, presented as evidence. Cameras swiveled toward her lenses, tightening on her face. People expected an outburst, a collapse, but Serena was calm as ever. She draped herself in a black robe, placed her hands on the table, and spoke, her voice resonant and controlled. "This courtroom is where justice sits, not where crimes are hidden. Today I am here to speak for those who have been silenced." A few murmurs rippled through the crowd before stillness fell again, heavy as a curtain. The judge opened the hearing, his voice cool but professional. "We grant permission to present new evidence." Marcus stepped forward and set a thick folder on the table. "Your Honor, we submit 47 complaints, all tied to allegations of police misconduct, everyone dismissed as insufficient evidence by Internal Affairs." The room stirred with uneasy sounds, a few gasps, even soft sobbing. The internal radio recording played. A man's voice echoed hard as hail. "Keep this quiet. Don't let the DA's office know. Hold it down." The sound was brittle, undeniable. Elena stood, her hand trembling slightly, and walked to the witness stand. As she spoke, pieces of evidence were projected on the screen, one by one: money transfer emails, black fund receipts, forged signatures, invoices from shell companies. Tasha presented her findings, too. The articles, the hard drive containing the uncut video with the laughter and mocking voices of two officers abusing their authority. Each file landed like a brick, shattering the wall of power. At the defense table, Grant Miles sat rigid. Deputy Commissioner Alan Cross stared at the screen, his face drained of color. Their titles were peeling away like bubbles bursting on the surface. The union members sat silent, their eyes shifting from pride to fear. Through each testimony, Serena proved more than her own pain. She restored the faces and voices of victims who had been erased. She read statements from a female delivery worker beaten senseless, from a student falsely charged, from an interpreter publicly humiliated. Their words filled the courtroom, no longer pleas, but verdicts. When it came time for the two arresting officers to take the stand, Drake and Collins walked up, their eyes hollow as if realizing their shield had vanished. The defense tried to object, but the judge's gavel struck. "Proceed." Marcus played the original video. The footage showed Drake ripping the badge from Serena's hand, his mocking laugh, Collins lifting his phone to take a photo. It was irrefutable. They had believed what they did in private would stay buried. Now it stood exposed under the law. Drake shouted, his voice cracking, "You provoked us! You caused chaos!" But Elena stayed composed, countering with data, with email chains, with payment records. Tasha added a thread of internal messages between high-ranking officers. "Hold this case. We'll handle it internally." The white text on the black screen struck like hammer blows. Emotion surged through the courtroom. Family members of victims rose from their seats, sobbing, holding one another. A journalist near Serena's age stepped to the microphone, his voice tight. "I've seen injustice, but never corruption this blatant. Whispers turned into voices, and voices turned into demands." In that crescendo, Serena remained silent. She scanned the room, her gaze settling on the judge, before she spoke slowly, each word cutting through the air. "They thought by shaving my head, they stripped me of dignity. In truth, they gave me something greater: transparency." The words pierced the silence like an arrow, not just an accusation, but a declaration of a new era. Those words reached into the deepest corners of her pain and drew out a strength reborn. Applause followed, not loud, but enough to affirm that justice could begin with an act the world saw as humiliation, yet end with the light of revelation. The hearing lasted the entire day, each passing hour peeling back more layers of corruption. Those who had once been afraid began to speak. A former internal affairs officer, his face hidden, confessed that complaints had been buried for years. A cop who once worked alongside Drake quietly turned in a drive containing full body cam footage. Every fragment aligned, revealing a structure of profit built on the lives and dignity of citizens. When court adjourned for recess, Serena stepped into the hallway. An elderly woman approached, clasped her hand, and whispered, "Thank you for not staying silent." Serena looked at her worn hands, saw fatigue in her eyes, but also warmth. "This is my work," she replied softly, "and it isn't finished." Behind the courtroom walls, the once untouchable officials now understood one thing: when truth surfaces, power becomes nothing more than a name, not a shield. Serena walked toward her car, the light glinting off her bare head. Inside her, a new resolve had taken root, not just to avenge herself, but to restore balance to a city that had lived too long in silence. The night after the hearing, New Orleans did not sleep. A gray mist hung over the city like a damp mourning veil. On every television screen, the same headline played on loop: District Attorney Serena Cole exposes police corruption network. Yet alongside the cheers and praise came a wave of retaliation. Conservative papers launched smear campaigns calling Serena a mentally unstable woman driven by personal vendetta. She sat before the flickering glow of her television in her small apartment, the blue light casting a calm, unreadable hue across her face. Marcus called his voice urgent. "They're launching a counter-investigation claiming you abused your authority and violated procedure," Serena replied quietly. "I know. When they run out of arguments, they throw mud." The phone rang again. It was Noah. "Mom? There's someone outside the house. They're just standing there watching me." Serena shot to her feet, her heart tightening. She told him to stay in his room, then called Marcus to send people over. For the first time in years, she felt how thin the line between justice and danger truly was. 2 hours later, Marcus reported back. "They're gone. Didn't touch the house, just wanted to scare you." Serena sat in the dark, her hands clenched, thinking. If they were willing to threaten a child, it meant her path had reached the roots of power. The next morning, Tasha arrived at the office with dark circles under her eyes. "They're following me," she said. "Someone searched my computer." Serena shook her head. "This is only the beginning. Now we take the next step, hand everything to the feds." Marcus nodded sharply. "I've already spoken with the Civil Rights Division. They're ready to receive all the files." But just then, Elena burst through the door, pale as paper. Cross is dead. The room froze. A car accident on the highway, the vehicle caught fire. But the footage shows an unmarked truck driving away. Marcus exhaled heavily. "They're clearing the board." Serena's voice was low but steady. "Which means we're winning." That afternoon, she received an anonymous email, "Stop, or the boy will be next." There was no doubt left this battle had stepped beyond the law. She sent Noah out of state to stay with his aunt, then returned to the office, eyes hardened with resolve. "I will not back down. Justice has no right to be afraid." That night she met Marcus and Tasha at an old warehouse near the docks. The air reeked of salt and oil. Marcus spread out a map pointing to a string of names: Grant Miles, Union Chief Ross Manor, several complicit judges. "We have enough to indict them all, but we have to release it the right way or it'll be buried." Tasha opened her laptop. "I have a solution. A coded blog that uploads directly to international media servers. Once I hit send, it can't be deleted." Serena stared at her for a long moment. "If you do this, you'll become a target." Tasha shrugged. "You wore the handcuffs for all of us. The least I can do is endure a few threats." Before sending, they looked together at the screen. Lines of text, sound files, video clips, all the evidence of abuse, corruption, and cover-ups. Serena placed her hand on the mouse, her gaze firm. "This is for Evan, and for everyone who's been silent too long." The click was soft, almost like a breath, but it was enough to shake an entire system. By morning, the nation was in uproar. The headlines spread across every network, Blue Shield network exposed. The Department of Justice announced a federal investigation. Police Chief Grant Miles was suspended. Dozens of officials were summoned. On television, anchors declared this scandal could trigger the largest justice reform in Louisiana's history. But even as the public roared, the shadows stirred. When Serena stepped outside the courthouse, her car was wrecked, painted red, with the word traitor. She stood still, not angry, just tired but certain. Marcus ran up breathless. "They're sending a message." "Yes," she said softly. "But they've forgotten one thing. Threats only work on those who are still afraid. I'm not." That night in her dim office, Serena sat down to write a letter to Noah by hand. "If one day you read this, remember that justice is not the sword, but the hand that keeps it from falling." I stood up, not because I was stronger than them, but because I couldn't bear to see anyone else humiliated the way I was. She folded the letter carefully, tucked it into her drawer, and turned to the window. Outside, the city lights shimmered through the thin rain. In the distance, sirens wailed like a reminder that the battle was far from over. And Serena knew this night was only a fragile calm before the next storm, as justice began dismantling the empire they once thought untouchable. The rain fell endlessly that night, turning the streets of New Orleans into rivers of gold under the dim glow of streetlights. Serena drove through the downpour, the windshield wipers keeping rhythm with the steady, contained pulse of her heart. She knew she was being followed. The rearview mirror reflected a pair of headlights that had trailed her for several blocks. Instead of running, she turned sharply toward the old docks where streetlights faded, and the sound of waves hitting the rocks echoed like the slow breathing of the deep sea. She killed the engine and waited motionless, letting whoever was behind her make the next move. No one appeared. Only rain and wind kept her company in the darkness that watched in silence. In the trunk, Serena kept a sealed envelope, the USB drive Tasha had handed her before disappearing 2 days earlier. The journalist had vanished without a trace, leaving only one last message. If I don't show up, use this video. It's the proof of everything. Serena still remembered the look in Tasha's eyes, bright with courage even as they trembled. Now, that tiny drive, no larger than a finger, carried a storm that the city had never faced. She returned to the office just before midnight. Marcus was waiting, eyes hollow from exhaustion, with Elena beside him, her face pale with fear. "We have to act now," Marcus said. "I just heard that Grant Miles called a closed meeting with court officials. They're preparing to suspend you for disrupting public order." Serena opened her laptop and plugged in the USB. The screen lit up with folders labeled Internal Court Footage. She clicked on the first file. A dark meeting room appeared where Grant Miles, Alan Cross, and a senior judge were discussing how to contain District Attorney Cole. Grant's voice was crystal clear. "If she keeps pushing, we'll handle it off the record. No one's going to protect a black woman that confident." Marcus held his breath. Elena covered her mouth. Serena sat still, her expression cold as steel. "What are you going to do with it?" Marcus asked. "Release it, but not yet." "What are you waiting for?" "The right moment. When they think I've fallen, that's when they'll be unguarded." She stood and walked to the window. The rain continued to pour. "Tasha is missing. Cross is dead. They won't stop at threats." Marcus, back up everything to 3 drives, 1 to the feds, 2 hidden somewhere safe. Marcus nodded. "And you?" "I'm going to see Whitaker," she said, her tone flat. "The man behind all of it. If Grant is the wolf, Whitaker is the one who feeds the pack." The next morning, Serena walked into the central courthouse, her shaved head glinting faintly beneath the weak sunlight. Staff members stopped to watch her pass, their eyes filled with equal parts fear and awe. The door to Chief Justice Whitaker's office swung open, a blast of cold air spilling out like from a crypt. He stood inside, silver hair slicked back, wearing a polished smile. "Serena Cole," he said smoothly. "You're persistent. I'll give you that. You know, I've never been good at quitting." Whitaker smiled faintly. "Sometimes to save the system, we must remove the ones who disrupt it." "You're mistaken," Serena said, stepping closer. "I'm not disrupting anything. I'm holding up a mirror so you can finally see yourself." The air thickened. Serena placed a heavy folder on his desk and opened it, revealing photos of Grant, Cross, and Whitaker together in a secret meeting. "These are the faces of the system. You're protecting a system greased by money, blood, and silence." Whitaker narrowed his eyes, his voice still calm. "You're crossing the line, Cole. I can have your position revoked in 3 days. And I," she replied evenly, "can end your career in 3 minutes. His expression faltered, genuine anger flashing in his eyes. "Who do you think you are? The one you didn't expect. The woman you tried to break with handcuffs and clippers but forgot that justice has no hair for you to pull." For a moment, the only sound in the room was the ticking of the clock. Serena's voice was steady, deliberate like a verdict. You have two choices, Whitaker: cooperate with the feds or let them drag you out in chains. I'm not here to ask. I'm here to inform. When she left the room, Serena knew Whitaker wouldn't sleep that night. Neither would she. That night she returned to her office alone, watching the files upload to a secure server. The glow of the screen reflected off her bare head, flickering like a candle in the rain. A message came from Marcus. The union's panicking. "Grant Miles has fled the city." Serena replied simply, "That's fine. They can run." But the truth doesn't. She closed her eyes, listening to the steady rhythm of rain against the glass. In a half-sleeping haze, she saw Evan standing in the courthouse hallway, his eyes kind but unwavering. He spoke softly. "You've brought them to the point of no return. Keep going for those who never got the chance." When she awoke, dawn had broken. Serena put on her coat and looked out the window where the clouds were parting, and the weak sunlight glowed over the courthouse dome. She knew that today would mark the final turning point. Either she would be buried, or she would bring down an empire. And she smiled, because no matter the outcome, she had already forced justice to open its eyes. Monday morning broke with a pale, cold light that washed over the damp stone steps of the federal courthouse. Serena stepped out of her car, head held high, the gray suit hugging her frame, nothing to hide the faint scars along her scalp. Outside the metal barricades, the crowd split into two roaring tides, one side waving signs that read, "Justice for Serena," the other chanting back the blue. Their voices collided and echoed in the crisp air, merging into an invisible battle between justice and fear. Marcus waited by the door, eyes shadowed a folder clutched in his hand. "The feds are here," he said. "They want to see you before the announcement." Serena nodded and moved quickly down the long hallway that smelled of wax and old paper. At the far end, two FBI agents, a man and a woman, stood waiting. The woman's short silver hair, neatly cropped, extended her hand. "Special Agent Diana Chen. We'll be coordinating with you on the federal investigation into the Blue Shield network." Her tone was calm, but her eyes were sharp as a scalpel. Serena replied, "I only need one thing, that the truth doesn't get negotiated." Chen studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Then we're on the same side." They entered the courtroom, heavy with tension, so thick it could be heard in every breath. At the defendant's table sat Grant Miles, head bowed, his police uniform stripped of its badge, his hands clenched tightly together. Behind him, the union lawyer leaned in to whisper, trying to maintain composure. When the doors opened and Serena walked in, the room fell into silence. Her footsteps echoed like the prelude to a verdict. Every camera lens turned toward her. Chief Justice Whitaker was not present. He had been arrested the night before when the FBI discovered a hard drive containing records of internal settlements and secret payouts. The news had spread through the city like wildfire. The image of him in handcuffs, pale and stunned under flashing lights, was everywhere. Serena knew this was only the beginning. The session opened with the statement from the federal prosecutors. This is not the misconduct of a few individuals. This is an organized network of corruption that has infected the entire local justice system. When the video from the USB appeared on the large screen, the murmur of the crowd grew and then fell into dead silence. Grant's voice filled the speakers. "She doesn't know her place. If she won't step back, we'll make her silent." Cross's laughter followed, sharp and chilling. Serena sat, unmoving, her eyes fixed on the screen, not a flicker of emotion. When the video ended, she stood and spoke, her voice clear as a blade. This isn't just about me. It's about every person who's ever been humiliated, beaten, or buried under a file marked insufficient evidence. Today, we are not judging people. We are judging silence. The courtroom erupted. A middle-aged woman stood and shouted, "My son died in their hands. Thank you." District Attorney, the cries, the applause, the chants of justice filled the air, forcing the judge to pound his gavel again and again. Amid the commotion, Grant suddenly rose to his feet, face flushed red, shouting, "You destroyed the entire police force just to settle your personal grudges. Who do you think you are?" Serena turned toward him, her eyes blazing under the white light. "I'm the one you thought would never speak. And that's exactly why I'm here," Grant shouted again, but two federal officers grabbed his arms, holding him down. His defiance collapsed into silence, and the entire room froze. Serena looked over at Diana Chin, their eyes meeting a quiet exchange, a promise. The hearing ended in a gray drizzle that afternoon. As Serena stepped outside, the glare of hundreds of cameras forced her to shield her eyes. Reporters crowded in microphones raised like a forest of spears. "District Attorney Cole, are you afraid someone yelled?" Serena paused, the corners of her lips curving into a faint smile. "Of course I am. But justice doesn't need the fearless, it needs those who refuse to run." That evening, back in her apartment, the city lights flickered through the windows. Noah called from his safe place, his voice bright and clear. "Mom, I saw the news. They're calling you the Iron Judge." Serena laughed softly, the first real laugh in weeks. "No, sweetheart. I'm not made of iron. I'm just human. But even humans can make iron bow." After hanging up, she stepped onto the balcony and took a deep breath. Across the river, buildings shimmered with reflected light. Somewhere in that city, truth had begun to seep into every office, every file, every person who once lived in fear. And Serena knew the storm had passed, but the awakening had only just begun. The morning after the final trial, the city seemed to exhale a long, weary breath it had been holding for years. Thin sunlight broke through the clouds, spilling over the federal courthouse where new flags were raised, not in celebration, but in remembrance of those who had fallen to the silence of justice. Serena Cole stepped out from the corridor, her stride slow but steady, her shaved head catching the faint light. She stopped at the stone steps where she had once been dragged and humiliated, feeling the river breeze brush past her like an invisible hand, wiping away old scars. Marcus approached, handing her the morning paper. "The federal indictments are out. Grant, Miles, Whitaker, Cross. They all confessed." Serena said nothing, her gaze drifting toward the Mississippi River flowing quietly in the distance, her eyes calm and deep. "No one really wins in battles like this," she said softly. "Only justice, and sometimes it comes late." Marcus smiled faintly. But it came. They walked down the street together. People stopped to greet her, some women had shaved their heads in solidarity, and children shouted, "Justice." For all, Serena bowed slightly, her eyes glistening. That afternoon, she returned to her office, where photographs of victims lined the hallway. Inside, Tasha Green was interviewing a group of law students, young faces filled with purpose, saying they had chosen this path because of her story. Serena watched in silence, a gentle mix of peace and sorrow stirring in her chest. When everyone left, she remained alone, opening a letter from Noah sent from school. "You taught me that justice isn't something given, it's something that must be protected every day. I'm proud of you, Mom." A quiet smile curved her lips. Outside the window, a fine drizzle began to fall, mist like rain, glittering on the courthouse roof under the street lights, like drops of liquid metal. Serena stood and looked into the mirror hanging above her desk. In the reflection, the humiliated woman from years ago was gone. In her place stood a prosecutor who had weathered the storm and forced an entire system to change. She whispered softly as if speaking to herself, "Justice never dies. It only waits for someone brave enough to call its name."